record this program so we have it for Mark. And without further ado, take it away, Mark.
Yes, hello. So has anyone ever seen a Disney movie? How many of you have been to Disneyland, Disney World, Disney Euro, Disney anything, right? Okay, so Disney's got a very, very unique and very solid brand. Would you agree? So what I'd like to present to you today is the opportunity to learn the strategy behind Disney. So how many of you would like to learn a strategy that you can apply to your business or your life so that you could have a brand like Disney? Anyone interested?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so the key thing to understand about Disney first is he started with a vision, right? And that vision drove everything, but it wasn't what you would think it is. It's not a typical business vision. You know, when they asked him, what does the future look like? He says, well, I can't tell you exactly, but it's way off in the distance and kind of sparkly, right? So, but when you think of Disneyland, right, isn't everything Disney kind of way off in the distance and kind of sparkly, right? That's like a perfect thing. So that vision is outliving him by decades at this point. So, you know, it's a very basic statement, but yet it's very profound and it drives everything Disney. And there's a process of how to turn that way off in the distance kind of sparkly into physical, tangible reality of things that we can utilize as Disney and that will make the company money and attract people. So, you know, Walt Disney had this wonderful ability to connect his innovative creativity with successful business strategy and popular appeal, which allowed him to establish an empire in the field of entertainment that, like I said, has survived decades even after his death. So, you know, Disney embodies the ability to make a successful company based on the creativity, and he presents a process of turning fantasies into concrete and tangible expressions, you know, in a way that, you know, Disney's chosen medium is a great analogy of the expression, you know, using his animated films. You know, it categorizes the fundamental process of how he takes this creative genius and how he takes this ability to take something that exists only in the imagination and forge it into a physical existence that directly allows you to experience and have the experience and others experience in a very positive way. So the simple yet worldwide appeal of Disney's characters and animated films and live action features and amusement parks all demonstrate this wonderful ability to grasp and then synthesize and simply just very basic, you know, techniques, but in a quite sophisticated principle. He's taken that, and he's also responsible for a number of important technical and organizational innovations that all follow the strategy that I'm going to teach you here today. So originally when Anne-Marie saw this, I did 3 90-minute presentations on each of 3 parts of the strategies. So I'm going to take all that and condense it down into one 30 to 40-minute presentation today that's going to capture the essence of that. And anyone who wants to learn more can reach out to me. I put my information in the chat. If you want to send me an email and visit my website, you're welcome to do that. And then we can go into ways that these strategies can directly apply to you. So this is going to be very interactive today. I'm going to guide you through a couple of quick processes. So, you know, we'll take a couple of minutes just to work with each one of the steps. This way you have a visceral experience of each of the strategies, and it helps you to remember it and also to integrate it and apply it. So, you know, information is great, but what I like to look for is what's the relevance of that information. So I'm going to guide you through taking this information, and not just like this great and wonderful story about Disney. I'm not going to get into the whole history of Walt Disney, although that's probably a great story in and of itself. But what I want you to do is I want you to think about your story and apply it to this strategy in a way that it unfolds for you. And like the way off in a distance and kind of sparkly, it's not a conscious tangible thing. It's kind of big picture and vague, but it drives everything. And you're going to have each of those steps, the big picture, the medium picture, the small chunk detail, and it's going to all integrate together into one strategy for you that you can then apply in your business or your life. So I learned this through my studies with, well, first off, I'm Mark Siegel, business coaching strategies. And, you know, my background is in hypnosis, NLP, and success in business coaching. So what I've done is over the years, I've studied many different things, and the process of modeling is like the core essence of NLP. Is anyone familiar with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming? Okay, so I'll give a brief explanation of NLP. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So neuro is your five senses, the way that you take in information, right? It's our connection to the external world. Linguistics is language, the way that we process or make sense of that information. And programming is the patterns or the habits or the behaviors that come from that. So I tell you that only because that relates to what we're going to do today. This was originally modeled, actually after Disney had passed on, a man by the name of Robert Dilts, who's one of the founders in the field of NLP, who I studied directly with, models strategies of excellence or strategies of genius, he calls it. So the model that I'm teaching you today is extracted from my learnings and teachings of Robert Dilts. And he's a great person to study with. He's still alive and well and living in Santa Cruz, California, a very beautiful place. It was like a resort and a university all in one. So kind of like Disneyland, right? But in a university style. So there's three main parts to the Disney strategy. I'm going to give you each of the parts. And then there's kind of like a separate overview part. And I'm going to tell you the three parts, but we're going to do them out of order, and for a very important reason, because a lot of people, the third part usually comes up first. And if we can kind of clear up the third part, then the first two parts will be a lot easier. And then we'll go through 1, 2, 3 in sequence at that point. So we're going to do the third part kind of twice. So the first part, and if you want to take notes, I welcome that, but I'm going to guide you through this to experience it. But I'm just going to give you the quick overview right now. Is there's the dreamer, right? So what's the dreamer? So my word, I didn't get my word. My word is imagination. And I have a second word also, opportunity, right? So, you know, I've been looking at this whole situation that the world is going through as an opportunity rather than a problem. So problems are the seed of an opportunity. So if you have a problem in your life, go, yes, and then say, wow, what's the opportunity in this? So the Disney strategy gives you the model of how you can turn that problem into an opportunity. So that's why I like imagination and opportunity. So the first part is the dreamer, right? So you got to have a dream. You got to have a vision of what you want. You got to have an idea. You got to, as crazy as it is, you know, everything starts with, hey, I got this idea. You know, for most people, the third part then steps in immediately and squashes it. So the third part of the strategy is the critic, right? So no one likes a critic, do they? anyone welcome a critic into their life? Hey, you know what? I'm feeling too good today. Can you criticize me? You know, it's like, so no one likes the critic, but that's why we're going to address the critic first. Okay. And then the second part of the strategy is the realist. So it's the practical person. It's the manager. It's the person who takes the dream and makes it real, right? So it's a very important part, but not necessarily the first part. The realist doesn't necessarily have the creativity to come up with a new idea. The realist can take an idea and implement it. The realist can organize things. The realist can find out the logistics of what needs to be done. That's the power of the realist. So the sequence is the dream, then the realist, then the critic. Okay, so we're going to start with the critic though. And then there's one more, which is kind of like an overview of stepping back, which when I guide you through actually going through the process for yourself, will utilize that part. And it's called a meta position, or above or outside of or overview of the strategy. So the critic, right? We all have this kind of chatter in our mind, right? And if you're saying what chatter in my mind, it's that voice that just said what chatter in my mind. So, and a lot of times, when we try to be the dreamer and we try and get out there and do something new or innovative, or we come up with this great idea, then this inner critic comes in and says, yeah, but you remember that time you tried that thing in the past and it failed? Remember that time you were going to do this and you were so excited about it, but then you ran out of funding. You remember you were going to get everybody into it and then no one went along with it. So that critic is based upon the past, right? So I'm going to invite you to go through a little quick exercise to just kind of let go of the critic, right? Anybody want to let go of the critic a little bit? Okay. And then what we're going to do later is we're going to reshape the critic so that the critic can actually be one of your greatest assets. So that's, that was the most profound part of this for me, was turning that critic into an asset. Okay. Cause I have tendencies to be a perfectionist, and I love Jeffrey Gitomer's take on perfection. It's like, well, you don't have to get it perfect. And it's like, okay, Sparky, which part do you want me to mess up? So there is a benefit towards, striving for excellence. One of my mentors wrote a book called Stop Chasing Perfection and Settle for Excellence. So it's a good model that if you do have perfectionist tendencies, if that's where the critic is coming from, is to help you to be perfect at everything that you do, then you can kind of say, okay, well, let's shape that to push me to be excellent, to be the best that I can be in this moment with the resources that I have. So that's really, one of the ways to reshape the critic is to turn it into a question. So anyone have an example of a criticism that they hear or that they say to themselves, or something that kind of like you feel might be holding you back? Anyone want to volunteer? No one? Okay. Liz?
So, you're not experienced enough. You don't have enough experience to do that.
Okay, cool. So if you take that, you're not experienced enough, it's criticism, right? It's putting you down. It's not going to lift you up. It's putting you down, right? So how could you turn that into a question that might empower you, or that might stop you from making a mistake?
What kind of experience would I need to implement my plan?
Right.
Something like
Right.
that?
How much experience do you need? You're not experienced enough, right? You're talking about quantity, so let's keep it on the same level. How much experience do you need before you can get started, right? So that's one of the key things to reshape criticism, is to turn it into a question. And then I'm going to show you how the critic can actually be your protector, right? Starting off as the devil's advocate, so to say, but shaping it into your protector so that you don't waste a lot of time, you don't waste a lot of money, you don't waste a lot of energy going down the wrong pathway or something that's not going to pan out in the way you planned, right? So everyone have that, the critic, right? So the critic, kind of tells us things. And what I want you to do is just take a moment, and you can close your eyes for this if you want, but I just want you to, you don't have to say anything, but just hear that inner critic. Like at one point, just think of something that you tried to do and that critic kind of squelched it and gave you the criticism, and it kind of discouraged you or pulled you away from it. So just close your eyes for a minute and just imagine that critic right now. Okay, that voice. And I want you to just notice, if you had to picture it, which direction is it coming from? If you had to hear it, where is that sound coming from? What's the tone of voice? What's the volume of it? But again, most importantly, which direction is that voice coming from? Is it in front of you, behind you, to one side or the other, above you, below you? And just get in touch with that critical voice and notice where it's coming from. And then what I want you to do is imagine if you could grab hold of that critical voice and kind of pull it out wherever it is, but make sure it's in front of you. And then push it out into the distance, but make it bigger. And as it gets further away, make it bigger. So your perception of it is that it's the same size, but it's just bigger and further away. And now you can see whose voice that is. It's probably not your own voice, and it's probably not a voice from the present or the future. It's probably a voice from the past, typically. And when you put it out in front of you, you can see what that voice is, and you can question it and say, what's your intention for me? Like, you're putting me down, you're criticizing me, what's your intention for me? So a lot of people have expressed to me that the intention of their critic is to protect them, is to keep them safe, is to keep them on track with their goals, is to make things happen in the best possible way. So that's a pretty positive intention for a pretty negative character in your story, right? So what I want you to do is just request of the critic that can it now express its critique, right? Not criticism, critique, right? So I'm very intentionally shifting the words for you. So it's not criticism anymore, it's now critique. And that critique, intention behind it is to protect you and to keep you on track with your goals and to shape you to make sure that everything that you create comes to be in the way that you want it to be or better. Good or good? Okay, so anyone still have an issue with the critic, or we can kind of, so what you can do, you kind of push that critic way off into the distance and then move it back around to the side and, you know, look at the stairs and then open up the door underneath the stairs and kind of put it in that closet underneath the stairs. And we're going to visit the critic a little bit later. And there's a reason it's in that closet underneath the stairs in the back of the warehouse, okay? But for now, that's where it'll stay. And here's the key thing to Disney strategy is there's three things that we're going to explore with this strategy: the dreamer, the realist, and the critic. But here's the most important and essential part of this is that initially we need to keep them in separate rooms. So, you know, everyone here has seen or experienced something Disney, and if I played 5 movies for you that you had never seen before, and I told you one of them was a Disney film, how many of you, you know, without knowing any of the content, how many of you would guess that you'd do a pretty good job at guessing which one of the 5 movies was a Disney film? Right. Okay. So most of you. So the thing is, why is that? Because a Disney movie's got a certain feel to it. It's got certain elements to it. It's got a structure to it, and it follows kind of a pattern. Even if it's a totally different story than you've ever seen with Disney before, and even the companies and products and services that Disney has acquired that were created by other people. I mean, they acquired Sesame Street. They acquired Star Wars, Pixar, Dreamworks. All of these companies all have that Disney-esque quality, okay? And that's why they were natural to be part of Disney, okay? So the way that comes about is really from keeping these 3 areas separate of the dreamer, the realist, and the critic. So everyone have a piece of paper or something you could take notes on, okay? Or you can do it on your computer screen, or you can just keep it in your head if you don't have it. But what we're going to do is I want to create 3 spaces, okay? And you could touch 3 spaces on your desk or table in front of you if you want to do it. But you're going to designate one of those spaces is the dreamer, one of those spaces is the realist, one of those spaces is the critic. I mean, when I do this one-on-one in person with someone, we actually put 3 circles on the floor and they jump into it, okay? But what I want you to do now is look at either, you know, draw circles on a paper, you know, these 3 circles, the dreamer, the realist, and the critic, okay? And in a moment, you're going to take your hand and just touch the one that says dreamer. Not yet. But what I want you to think about is some new project or some endeavor or something you've always wanted to do, maybe write a book, maybe launch a new business or come out with a new product or, you know, start a new relationship in your life, redesign your home, whatever it is, just some new kind of creative project. It could be small, it could be big, whatever it is. Just, I want you to use that for this exercise. And then you'll be able to use this for anything that you want to create in your life. But the thing is, I want you to start with something tangible and real for you. But first, before we apply it to the actual dream, I want you to touch that space that says dreamer. Okay. And just put yourself in the mode of, you know, like maybe when you were a little kid or sometime in the past when you were just like, ideas just came to you. You just like, you weren't even really thinking consciously. It's just like all of these ideas just came to you. And maybe you grabbed a piece of paper or some way to take notes and you just started writing these ideas down, just kind of like free thinking. Or maybe even, you know, for me, it happens a lot of times when I'm in the shower, so I don't have a notepad, but these ideas just kind of come to me and it's like, wow, that's cool. Wow, that's a great tagline, or that's a great marketing idea, or that's a great new service that I can offer, that's a great new class that I can give. And just these ideas just kind of flow and you kind of like feel yourself kind of like lifting up. You feel lighter, you feel more expressive, you're more visual, you feel like you're moving towards something in the future. You know, it's not short term, it's like a long term vision, you know, and it's very future oriented. And you can kind of internalize it in yourself. It's not in the outside world yet. It might be in your head. You might feel it somewhere in your body. You kind of feel this wonderful feeling that goes along with that. And it kind of matches other things that you've done in your life, that pattern. And it just, you kind of get into this creative mode of dreaming, right? Where anything is possible. Remember as a kid when we used to pretend and, you know, imagination, right? My word, imagine anything is possible, right? So if anything was possible, you can, it's limitless, right? So just touch that dreamer space and imagine anything is possible. There's nothing's impossible. Or as Adidas says, impossible is nothing, right? So anything that you want to dream, anything the mind of man or woman can conceive and believe, you can achieve, right? So it starts with that dream. Even Napoleon Hill said that in the #1 business book, Think and Grow Rich, right? Or personal self-help, or I don't even know where to categorize that book. That's a book for life, in my opinion. But so we've got the dreamer, right? So now what I want you to do, that you've got that space designated as a dreamer, that anything's possible. What Disney would do is he had all the crayons and markers and paints and clear cell for animation, music, whatever people wanted that helped them be creative was in this room of creation, the dreamer room, right? And you were not allowed to comment on anything, good or bad, right? Because even a good comment is still criticism. It's positive criticism, but it's still criticism. So in this room, and Disney it actually had it as a separate building, so that like, and you know, I don't know, you know, maybe they took people's temperature or whatever, or made them wear masks, or I don't know, but whatever they did, they screened people going in that you had to be in a neutral to positive state before you could even enter this space, and just like being around all these people where creativity was flowing, and you just had lots of paper and lots of crayons and pencils and markers and paints and anything you needed to express an idea and put it down on paper, and any idea was good. You just did it, moved on to the next, did it, move on to the next, and just create, right? And Disney really created that space. If someone started commenting to someone else, or even started talking to themselves about, hey, I don't know if this is gonna, you know, is it, you know, boom, they had to leave the room, right? Because only the creative dreamer is allowed in that space. So, you know, this is at your discretion, but what I want you to do now is think of something that you're creating in your life. And, you know, if you have to, close your eyes, but touch that space where it says dreamer, and just think about what's possible, right? Not what's probable, not what's plausible, but what's possible, right? That's it. And just think about your idea and how possible it is for you, right? And just think about what it's like. Just be with it, picture it, you know, hear any sounds that are associated with it. How does it make you feel in your body? You know, does it make your hair stand up? Does it give you like a tingle or a warm, fuzzy feeling? You know, what's the quality of the image? Is it in color? Is it panoramic? Is it clear to you? And just really allow that vision of the dream to expand for you in a way that it just gets you lit up. You know, it really motivates you to be part of your dream, right? Okay, and when you've got that, then you can just kind of take your hand off the dreamer space and you've kind of got that locked in there, right? So now what's next, right? So a dream is great, right? It's a great and wonderful vision, but how does that play out into the real world? You know, a dream's just a dream. You know, so we want to turn that into reality. So Disney has this dream. He's like, we got this mountain, and it's like a roller coaster, and it's like you're in the Swiss Alps, and it's got snow on it in the middle of Southern California, and you're riding through this roller coaster, and it's part of a mountain, and it's going to be this wonderful experience of being on a roller coaster, but being on a mountain, and kind of like being in Europe and experiencing it, and it's going to be a thrill, and it's going to be fun, and you're even going to hit water, and it's going to splash, and all this excitement, and you know, so this is the dreamer, right? Then he brings it to the next room, like Disney would walk in, see that picture of the mountain, grab it, and walk out. And as he's walking out, the guy's explaining it to him, and he goes, hold on, and they go into the realist, right? Now the realist job is to say, okay, if by some magic this is possible, muted. Okay, so if by some magic this is possible, where would we start, right? So the realist starts to look at, you know, how big would it be? How much materials is it going to take to make it? Where would we put it, right? How would we start to build it? How would we make it safe? How would we, you know, all the practical how-tos of it, right? So a lot of times in business, we have this dream, but we don't look at all the steps that it takes to do it, because the critic came in and squashed the idea before we even got it to the realist. But if you take the clean idea from the dreamer and bring that in its purity to the realist, now the dreamer's not even really part of this anymore, because he's going to try and justify his dream. And you don't want the dreamer to justify the dream. You want the realist to just look at it and say, okay, I'm going to assume that this is possible. And we're going to come up with a budget, and we're going to come up with practicality, and we're going to see how much money would we need from investors to make this happen. What's the mechanical things of it? What exists? What do we need to invent to make it happen? You know, and this is how Disney came up with, like I mentioned in the beginning, new and wonderful tools for the field of animation, is because, you know, he wanted to do something and the tools to make that happen didn't exist yet. So he hired a team of creative people and then passed it off to the realist and then made it happen, right? So he invented a lot of tools and techniques that are used to this day in pretty much the same way as he created them, because of the process of doing this. So the realist can now take any dream and see how it would be turned into reality. Still not deciding if it could or could not be done yet, but just looking, if it could be done, how would you do it? What are the steps? What's the practical implementation of it, right? So how much money is it going to cost? Where are you going to put it? How are you going to make it happen? What big of a team do you need? Do you need investors? Do you need other people? Can we do it on our own? Do we need to invent new products or services or tools or techniques to make it happen? So all the logistical stuff is part of the realist, right? And in a lot of businesses, the realist is also kind of like the management team, or, you know, the people that handle the budgeting. So, you know, there's the dreamer is usually at the top of the company, comes up with this dream or this vision for the business. Then the realist is more the middle of the company, the management, the one who practically implements it, the mechanic in the business. not necessarily the entrepreneur. Okay, and now back to the critic, right? Remember that room all the way in the back of the warehouse, in the closet underneath the steps, right? So now, like we hand it, the dreamer had this great idea, right? And the realist worked out all the how-to steps, right? Now we've got a plan, we've got it written on paper, like with pictures and everything, like this whole proposal, right? And we kind of open up that closet door and throw it in and shut the door, right? So in Disney's world, in the world of Disney films, this is the editor, right? The critic is the editor. He's the one who cuts out all the BS, right? All the stuff that doesn't belong, all the outtakes, all the stuff that he determines is not going to be part of the end product, right? And like I mentioned with Liz earlier, is that if you take that criticism to heart, it squashes the whole project, right? But if you turn it into critique by shifting it as a question, now that question becomes feedback, right? So it's not, this is wrong. It's, what could go wrong with this? It's not, that's going to fail. It's like, have you taken into consideration a contingency if this fails? Like, what's your next step if it fails? So the critic now gives you feedback, right? It gives you second sight. It gives you an outsider's view who's not, they could care less about the dream. They could care less about how to implement the dream because they don't care about the dream. All they're looking at is how can they punch holes in this, right? So if the critic can punch holes in it, it's very likely that so can other people, right? But if you can have a dream that's so solid that you're locked in on, right? And you've taken the practical steps and you've got all these steps, a rock solid plan to implement it, and you put it to the critic and the critic can't punch holes in it, guess what? You've got success, right? So the critic can be your greatest asset. So first, let's go back to the realist, right? And what I want you to do is just think about a time where you were like totally task oriented, or when you took an idea and you worked out step by step how you're going to implement it. Maybe a strategy of, what do I need to do first? How much money do I need? If you've ever started a business, you have to do this kind of, even just in your head as a business plan of like, where am I going to go? What equipment do I need? Do I need an office? Do I need a warehouse? What space? So just take a moment, put your hand on the realist space, and just think about the practical implementation of anything you've done in your life. It could be, going to school. It could be doing something in a job. It could be doing something with your friends or family or your kids. And you had to come up with the steps of how you're going to make this happen. Anyone who's, like Liz was talking about going away on vacation, right? There's okay, so I got this great and wonderful idea of a vacation. Now the realist steps in and says, I got to book the tickets. I got to plan a hotel. I got to figure out what I'm going to bring with me and pack. So just put your hand on the realist and think about all those steps that it takes to implement something in your life and how you go through that and how you're good at that. Even if you're not organized, anyone with a good system can force themselves or fake being organized, right? And kind of get them through that process. So now you've got the dreamer and you've got the realist, right? We all know what that is. You can take your hand off that space. Okay, now you want to take it to the critic, right? So you're going to take this great and wonderful dream and your plan of action, and you're going to hand it to the critic. And I want you to just put your hand on that critical space, right? And think about all the times that you or someone else has criticized you or shot you down, and think of how that critic can now turn those into questions, right? And say, okay, so you've got these 5 steps. What if step number 3 doesn't turn out that way? Then that unwinds step number 4 and 5. What can you do to adjust it? So it's giving you feedback. Or in the past, you've tried this and it didn't work. What are you going to do differently this time? Right? So start to ask those different questions, and the questions direct your thinking instead of thinking in terms of impossibility. you start to shift it to think, how could it be possible, right? How can I make this real, right? So I've got this dream, I've got a plan of action, and now what do I need to protect myself that could go wrong, and unwind the whole thing before it actually comes to fruition. And I can now put part of the reality process, part of the realist in there to guard against that, right? Like any salesperson knows this. What's the first thing you do is you learn what are all your objections from your potential client, right? And then you build that into your sales pitch and your story of how you're expressing that to your client. So you're like, okay, yeah, I had this client one time, and believe it or not, they had this objection, which is like the number one objection, but you're telling it as a story, right? They had this objection, and and then here's what they realized after they took a deeper look at the product or service that I offer, and they realized, no, that's not a problem. That's really a wonderful aspect of this program that's going to help you. Oh, this is too much money. Yeah, but look at the value in it, because no one really cares how much someone costs. It's the level of the value compared to the cost of it. So these are the things that the critic can help to shape and redirect and send it back to either the realist or the dreamer, right? So now what I'd like you to do, and you can even just like lean back a little bit, but lean back and look at those three spaces, right? So you've got the dreamer, you've got the realist, and you've got the critic. And you looked at each one of those and how they relate to these projects in your life, right? So now you're in this meta position to see the interaction of what needs to happen. Does it need to go back to the dreamer and be fine-tuned? Or does it need to go to the realist and add in a couple of extra steps or remove some steps? Or does it need to revisit the critic or have the critic ask a different question? And you can allow, with a set of guidelines, 2 or more of these characters or areas to interact with each other so that they can kind of hash it out, right? So the critic or the realist are not allowed in the room of the dreamer, but they meet kind of in this neutral space and kind of fine tune the dream to build it bigger, right? Say, hey, this dream is good, but the way the realist played it out, in 5 years we're done. And you wanted this to go on, beyond your lifetime. What can we add to that dream to make it even bigger, right? So that's the critic asking that question, right? But it's done in a way that opens up a bigger possibility to the dreamer. And then the dreamer can dream bigger, right? Dreamers love to dream bigger, don't we? So it's an opportunity to open up, more possibilities. So this meta position gets to explore those. And then what you're going to do is, once you've played back and forth and you've got, okay, the dream is solid, the realistic plan is solid, and the critique is solid, then what you're going to do is you're going to take your hand and put it on the dreamer and think about the dream. And then you're going to move it over to the realist and think about how wonderful it's going to be when that dream is implemented and made real and all those steps are followed. And then you're going to take it over to the critique and ask, how am I doing? How's this going? What else do we need to adjust, right? And the critic's going to give their feedback, and then you're going to bring it all the way back to, you're going to take it to that neutral position of the meta position outside of it, look at those 3 interactions that just happened, and then you're going to bring it back to the dreamer, the realist, and the critic. Outside meta position, and then the dreamer, the realist, and the critic. And you cycle this through until you start to feel it viscerally, right? So one of the things of, I'm going to give this, I'm reading it, so it's a quote from Disney. So the story man must see clearly in his own mind, or women, sorry. The story a person must see clearly in their own mind how every piece of business in a story will be put. They should feel every expression, every reaction. They should get far enough away from the story to kind of take a second look at it, to see whether there's any dead phase or things that need to be weeded out, to see whether the personalities are going to be interesting and appealing to the audience. You should also try to see that the things that this character are doing are of an interesting nature. So this was kind of Disney's, that's his own quote and his philosophy of how he approached creating and implementing that process. So we've got the dreamer, right? Everyone clear on the dreamer? We've got the realist. Everyone clear on the realist? Okay, and we've got the critic, who we shape instead of criticism is now going to give you critique or feedback. Everyone clear on that? Right? So if you take your business idea and you plug it into this model, can you see how that will help you to shape that idea? Cool. So again, just to round off, my name is Mark, Business Coaching Strategies. Okay. My promise to business owners is I can help you find an additional $10,000 to $50,000 in lost revenues in your business in under 45 minutes. Okay. And I've written a book on how to do this, and it won't cost you an extra penny in marketing. And if you want a free copy of my book, you can go to businesscoachingstrategies.com and enter your name and email, and you can download a free copy of my book. And then if you want help in implementing it, you can reach out to me. I'd love to interview you and see how these ideas would work in your business. They've worked in hundreds of different businesses and professions. And I'd love to see if they'll work in your business or profession and go through how you can make that happen. And any questions, any critique, things you want me to know, feedback on the presentation. What's your biggest takeaway? Anyone want to share a takeaway?
That the critic is it's a critique, not a criticism. Some of us, like a few of us, raised our hands that we do welcome criticism, because I think I look at it as a gift, that they're telling me I'm doing something wrong, or I said something the wrong way. So I think of it as a gift, but I know most people don't think of it that way. But I am a very creative person, and I've heard many people tell me no. If I listened to everybody else, I never would have started Moxxie.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to believe in yourself and take it to the right realist to help you interpret it.
Right. So when the dreamer in that instance has kind of deaf ears to the critic, not ignoring the critic, but in the moment of dreaming, right, you kind of have your blinders on and you're just focused on the creative. And that's really the key part. Because most people that I've worked with, the biggest issue that they have is that the dreamer and the critic are in the same room, and it's not critique. And that'll squash any dream. That'll stop anyone from doing anything. And like you said, if you would have listened, you wouldn't have started. And all these people are benefiting from this wonderful thing that you've started. So thank goodness that you bypassed that critical voice at that moment, and you did it anyhow.
I think that goes to Walt Disney as well, right? He did not listen either. So many people told him, no, you can't do it. This is too big. It's too much money, including his brother, right? Who was the financial guy behind it, was like, wow, you really can't do this. And he said, we're doing it. We're going to find a way. So bring it to the realist, find a way to make it work. And, you know, had he listened to all those critics at that time, we wouldn't have the happiest place on earth.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, a lot of things, you know, come from that pure dreamer. I mean, Henry Ford, you know, they had the 6-cylinder engine, and Henry wanted an 8-cylinder engine. So he goes into his research and development area and he says, make an 8-cylinder engine. And they go, that's impossible. And he goes, great. I'll check back with you in 6 months to see how you're doing on it. And 6 months he checks back and they said, we told you it's impossible. He goes, great. I'll check back in 6 months to see how you're doing on it. And like maybe a year and a half, 2 years later, he walks in and guess what? Lo and behold, they created an 8-cylinder motor, which was impossible, right? But they did it anyhow. You know, if you look at most great things in the world, right? I'm doing a class with someone in Australia, right? and we're preparing for the class. So we're on a Zoom call, just the two of us. We've got Google Docs open, and we're writing an outline of part of the program. And we're both editing different parts of the document at the same time while interacting with voice and video and halfway around the world. And I just stopped for a minute. I go, whoa, like if you would have told someone 100 years ago that you could do this, they'd probably lock you away in some padded room or something like that. You know, because think about the logistics of how that would have had to been done 100 years ago. You would have had to write it on a scroll and hand it to someone on a horse to take it to the dock to ship it to Australia. And it would take months rather than seconds. So, you know, so much good comes from allowing the dreamer to dream and then taking it to the realist and then allowing the critic to look at it, you know? I mean, anything great wasn't without criticism, but that criticism sometimes made it even better, right? It took something that was good and made it great.
And
right?
isn't that how Las Vegas was started? Somebody had an idea about building this whole community in the desert. People were like, yeah, nuts. That's never going to happen. I forget who the person was. Does anybody know?
Bugsy Siegel?
Was it him?
Well, maybe not the one who said it was nuts. I think,
Right.
I don't know.
But somebody started
I saw the movie Bugsy, but I don't remember it. It's, you know, no relation.
Does anybody have a dream in their mind now that they would like to share?
I guess I'll share. It's Holly. I really thank you so much for the presentation. I'm putting together kind of a new business model, a business plan for small employers for 401k plans that's affordable. And I've had it in my mind for many years, and it's gotten to the point of like branding, but there's kind of still roadblocks, and sometimes I'm kind of my own worst enemy. And to have this broken out as you've done, as we were doing this, like I got a little bit of clarity as to where the next step is, and it kind of took that fear, you know, and put it aside. And yeah, I'm really, really grateful. Thank you so much. It was a great presentation.
Cool. Very happy for you.
Pinky, didn't you have
Great.
something you were going to share before?
It's interesting when I was listening to what you're sharing, Mark. I'm writing a book and my critic is so loud. And then I realized that it's actually a pattern of mine, that in the past when I've thought of new projects or initiatives, that oftentimes I let the critic win. So thank you for that. Putting that critic in, you know, putting them bigger and far away and then in another room was really helpful. Thank you.
Great. So are you clear on how to separate them and how to keep the dreamer present when you're in the creative mode?
It seems clear at the moment. I will let you know when I do it,
Well,
if I need help. Thank you.
Yeah. So that brings up a good point also, is that this strategy is a skill, right? So I taught you the basics of the skill, but how do you develop a skill? By using it, right? So the more you use this, the more you use any skill, right? The better you get at it. You know, think about driving a car. The first time you got in a car, you're overly conscious of every little thing that you're doing, right? But now you get in the car, you get on at exit 40, you get off at 47, but you don't remember 41 or 43, right? You just drive the car and you're talking to the person next to you or listening to an audiobook or a song on the radio. And we're able to drive on kind of autopilot. So, you know, you take that skill and you develop it consciously and intentionally, and then it becomes automatic and just, it shapes the way that you think. So Disney didn't have to think, oh, I'm going to run this through my strategy. It was just how he did it. And then it was actually modeled after the fact that he had separated it out in this way, and that's what made it succeed, because the key part in this is the dreamer. So, Liz?
So can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Part of the, and again, I know I read a lot of Walt Disney stuff because I'm just like a junkie for it, but a lot of what he did was not only just have his own dream, but he infected other people with his dream. It was just such a big part of who he was. It wasn't about, oh, I'd really like to do this one thing. It was it was all encompassing. It was who he was. And pulling other people into your dream, do you not think that that's helpful in helping propel you forward and giving you, you know, better ideas and keeping you moving?
Yeah, for sure. So what he did was having this model, right, would inspire people because, like I said originally, in the dreamer room, right, you were only allowed to dream. They screened people before they came in, and there was someone kind of like monitoring to make sure that everybody stayed in that dreamer mode. So it's that collective energy that one person feeds off another, not just off of Disney, but he created the environment that you're going to go into this space and you're just going to freely dream, right? So because he would come in there and freely dream and inspire people to do the same, and then that kind of spread throughout the room that everybody was in that mode, and it kind of kept that vibe in that visual, creative, dreamer mode, and that's really what kept that energy going. So his big picture of way off in the distance and kind of sparkly was the overlying dream for all of Disney, right? But then he had little micro dreams within that he would inspire, you know, to build Disneyland, to make the first full-length animated film, Fantasia. I mean, these are all like groundbreaking things that we take for granted nowadays. But, you know, back in those days, you know, the technology of Fantasia, I still watch it and it blows my mind. So
First full-length animated film was Snow White.
Oh, was it?
It was Snow White.
Okay, my bad. Thank you for
I love
correcting me.
Fantasia, but yeah, it was Snow White.
Okay. Yeah. So again, but he made that possible. No one had even thought of that before, right? And then he not only thought of it and not only overcame the impossibility of it, but he made it into reality, and it set a precedent of how Disney makes films.
Yeah. And he won the most Oscars for that film that year. He has all the little Oscars for all the dwarves too. And I forgot, I don't think it was the most Oscars for any animated film because it was the first one, but the most that year at all. Because it was just so groundbreaking, right? His dream literally changed the way we watch movies.
Yes.
How old was he when he started this? What was he doing before Disney?
Mark wants to answer that. I know it, but
I don't know. You can.
I'm a geek enough as it is.
I'm not the Disney historian. I'm just, you know, I just, from an NLP perspective and from a coaching perspective, I like the strategy, and I'm teaching you what I've learned from using it and what I've learned from Robert Dilts over the years. And I love Disney. I'm not nowhere near the fanatic that Liz is, and certainly not a historian of Disney. So I let you.
No, I'm certainly not a historian, but you know, I love learning about, first of all, because I love being there, right? And I love the movie. So I love learning about how did this come to fruition, right? And so he, as a young boy, I mean, very young, he was on his father's paper route. He did a lot of manual labor for a long time, but he was always an artist. And I think he started actually doing it professionally pretty young, 18, 19 years old. And he had his own very, very successful company. And he had, what's his name? Mortimer? I forgot what was the Oswald the rabbit. Yep. He created it. He, marketed it, made it, talk. There was no speaking at that time, but I mean, it was all his. And he partnered up with another company who stole it from him, who took it from him. They took the marketing rights to it because they sort of owned whoever was working under him, even though it was his creation. And as soon as he left, he said, I'm making my own and nobody's doing that to me ever again. And that's how we started Disney. Mickey Mouse, I'm sorry. But he did that pretty young. I mean, by the time he invented Mickey Mouse, I think he was in his very early 20s, 21, 22, something like that. And then he took off from there. So that's just a testament to how he never let that dream die, right? He kept that going. Even when you have these critics, never mind critics, people really knocking him down and trying to take things away from him. You just have to keep going, right?
Right. So I'm guessing that the critic, when the business was stolen from him, the critic said, how are you going to stop this new business from being stolen? Right? Rather than saying, oh, this one's going to get stolen too, which a lot of people play that story in their head, the critic would say, the critique would be, what are you going to put in place so that this is not stolen from you, so that you can build it as big as you imagine it? right? So you can make that dream come true. So anyone else with a takeaway they want to share, or question or feedback?
Mark, when you're working with people, what
Yeah.
do you find is the biggest obstacle for them? Is it getting over that critic part?
A lot of it is the inner voice. I do it in combination in working. The first thing I do is create a vision with them, but then we look at what stops or prevents them. So it's kind of different for each person, but a lot of times it is that critical inner voice, and most of the time it's not their own voice. It's a voice from either a parent or some mentor or teacher from their past that kind of just keeps playing over and over again. So there's a couple of different processes to unwind that, but really the thing that I address in working with someone is any limiting beliefs that were created as a result of that critical voice. So the critic's enough to deal with like one-on-one in a acute situation. But when it becomes chronic, and that then becomes a belief that, oh, I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or I don't have enough skills or abilities to make this happen, and that becomes a generalized belief, that's really where the tools of NLP and coaching come in to kind of unwind that belief and shape a new belief that is empowering. And a lot of that is done through the questioning. Hypnosis is a great tool for repatterning those old habits and behaviors really quick. So that's why I use that as a tool, even with business people. They don't like the word hypnosis, but, I tell people, I go, don't worry, there's no such thing as hypnosis, because it's all hypnosis. So, really a lot of it is the stories that we tell ourselves. And, is the story, and I have a process for helping people to rewrite their own story by looking at, okay, is it a historical story that like, this is what your life has been, so that's your story? Or is it a story, like the dreamer, this is what the future is going to bring, and you're kind of living into that story? Or is it just kind of like a newspaper? It's here's what happened today, and let's document it. So, but to have all three of those aspects into your story and to be able to use them with these three aspects of the strategy, like I said, the dreamer is more future oriented. The critic is more stuff that's happened in the past, and the realist is more present, right here, right now kind of stuff. Let's make it practical.
We have a book club at Moxxie that Liz and I are part of. So one of the books that we read that we all liked is The Happy Life Formula. And it talked about that studies indicate that it's a scientific fact that you are born with 50% of your personality. And that could be good or bad. It's just really comes down to genes. So you only have the other 50% to really change your life through actions and thoughts and things like that. But my question is, I'm wondering for those people, and we all know them, people that were born happy and people that were not born happy, are the people that were born happy, are they more likely to be the dreamers because they don't let other things stand in their way?
So I just finished a book by Bruce Lipton called The Biology of Belief. I don't know if you know him, but he talks about epigenetics. So genes are responsible for building, they're the blueprint for making proteins, which are the building blocks of your body. That's all genes do. They don't determine what those proteins do. They don't affect our personality. They don't affect anything other than the way the proteins are built in your body, which can affect the way that you look. But epigenetics is the thoughts that are shaped by the environment, right? So you said we're born with 50% of our personality because our environment starts before we're born. It starts in utero, and we're subject to what the mother is seeing, hearing, and feeling affects the biology of her blood chemistry, which gets to the baby, right? So this affects that. If you want to learn more about that, I'm doing a meditation tonight at 7 o'clock, and I'm going to utilize that exact process of how we can, you can change your physical body by changing your thoughts. Okay. I know someone, oh God, his first name, it'll come to me. The last name is Schwartz, but he wrote a book called It's Not What You Eat, But What Eats You. I think that's one of his books. Or, but he did one book on health, and what it was is in a hospital, like in a very clinical setting, he took petri dishes that had highly infectious diseases that, like, probably worse than COVID, right? So if you took this from the petri dish and even put it on the outside of your skin, you would get this infectious disease and die from it, right? God forbid. So, but he took a needle and he stuck it in the petri dish and got plenty of the disease on it, and he stuck it through his hand and pulled it out the other side and did not contract one disease. And he documented this in a hospital by showing the power of mind over matter, that he could super boost his immune system and direct the way his cells reacted to an invader, and he did not get sick from that. So that's kind of the epitome of it. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to demonstrate that, but I appreciate that he did it and documented it, and I'm grateful for that, so I can just tell the story about it. But the thing is, a lot of science now is finding that our thoughts, even with the law of attraction, our thoughts can shape our reality, but you have to put the emotion behind it. So when I do the Disney strategy, like in more than just a 30-minute presentation, when I'm doing, 90 or 120 minutes on just each part of it, I'm walking people through it and really locking in the physical experience of each of those spaces. So then they can apply whatever they want through that strategy. So I've given you kind of a taste of that today, and all of the steps are complete. It's just going to take a little bit more to implement it. So, but in terms of, I'm not saying it's true or not, but I don't buy into being born with 50% of our personality. If that's true, then I wouldn't be leading this presentation right now, because I was shy. I was born shy. I was that kid who sat in the corner and ate lunch by himself. I couldn't get up and speak in front of 5 people, yet alone 10 or 50 or hundreds of people I've spoken in front of. Okay. And, I overcame the critic to become more of the dreamer, and I implemented it into reality.
But your shyness doesn't necessarily mean you were unhappy. That was just a personality trait.
Right.
Couldn't you have been born happy, but born shy too?
Right. So what is happy? Happy is a chemical reaction to a thought. So I don't think that people are hardwired that they can only have one chemical reaction to one thought. I think we
No,
can.
I think the books and the studies, and Liz, if I'm wrong, tell me. It's just that you have a tendency. That's your basic
Right.
point. Either kind of born, but then 40% of it can be changed through your actions and your thoughts. So say somebody like you, I don't want to be too. I'm going to push myself. I'm going to go and sit with other people. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to go on with my schooling. So you use that 40% to really initiate your life and make it happy. So that 40% is a big chunk. And 10%
Right.
is what they said was just things like cars, house, monetary things like that. But it's not real happiness.
Right. So in the field of neurolinguistic programming, one of the famous techniques is a fast phobia cure, right, or a trauma cure. Okay. So, I do it in one session, but the actual process only takes about 5 minutes. And people can get rid of, I've had people fear of elevators, fear of driving in cars, fear of going over bridges, and boom, in 5 minutes, gone, right? I had one woman, she had a fear of snakes, and just conversationally gone in like 3 minutes. And the whole thing is that so people who would criticize that would say, well, you didn't really change anything. You just got rid of the symptoms, right? But if someone has a phobia, it's only showing up as a set of symptoms. If you get rid of the symptoms, do they still have the phobia? Who cares? They're not reacting to it anymore in a phobic manner. So in a sense, the symptom was the phobia. And if the symptoms are gone, the phobia is gone. Right? So that 40%, maybe the other 60% doesn't matter in that application. That's all I'm saying. But
It's fascinating.
I'd be open to reading the book. I'm curious. I read a ton.
Well, it's a very small book, so you can breeze by it.
Okay, cool.
Well,
That's favorite kind of books, the little ones.
You're not kidding. Does anybody have any other questions or comments for Mark before we get going? It's almost 2:00. No? All right. Well, Mark, I thought this was fascinating.
I have actually. Can I ask a quick question of Mark?
Sure.
Mark, I have to ask you this. Are you standing when you're presenting?
Yeah.
Okay. I figured. I gave my first presentation via Zoom, and I was terribly uncomfortable, and it was because I was sitting. I felt very stifled because I love the energy of walking around a room and looking at people and like just talking to them. And I was wondering whether I should try standing, and I didn't risk it because it was my first round, and I figured, oh, let me just try it sitting because it looks like everyone's sitting, and I was just following the group. But you look so much more comfortable. I think I would feel more comfortable standing. Have you tried it different ways?
I always present standing. It's just my energy. I need the freedom to move and express myself. And if I'm sitting, I feel kind of, it's not that I can't. I've done presentations sitting. I've done stuff that way. It's not the same. My energy is not the same.
Yeah, so as just feedback for you, you could tell the difference. You could tell you're comfortable. I think I would feel the same. So aside from the many other things I took away from your presentation, which was very well done, and I really grasped a lot. I'm going to reflect on it later when I'm in more of a creative mindset, because now after this, I'm going back into a different part of my brain, the work mode. So it's the critique part. But I just wanted to also double check. The book that you referenced was The Biology of Belief. Is that what you were?
Yeah, Bruce Lipton.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And Beth, the book that you were referring to, could you give me the title, please?
It's called The Happy Life Formula.
Thank you so much.
I thought this was wonderful, really. Hey, Mark, if we ever had you back in person, could you hypnotize somebody in front of us?
Sure.
Wouldn't that be interesting? We just got to get a guinea pig.
That'd be fun. Or if you want,
I can see why you do hypnosis, because you have a really soothing voice.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to come to the meditation tonight, it's at 7 to 8:30 p.m. The format is I do about 20 minutes or so of talking about a topic, and then we do about a half an hour of hypnotic meditation. Call it hypnotic mindful meditation, and it kind of guides you through implementing the content that we talked about in the beginning. And then we have a little bit of time at the end to just kind of questions, comments, and feedback like we're doing here, and everybody shares. So I think this is week 15. I started with a friend of mine who's a registered nurse in California, also NLP trainer and hypnotherapist. And we were going to make an audio to help people get over the whole thing with COVID and, the mental, emotional aspect of it, obviously not the physical part. But she got so overwhelmed at the hospital that she kind of backed out. And then I said, well, I got to do something. And I just jumped on it, and I did a live meditation called Stay Calm, Stay Healthy. And then everybody loved it, and it kind of snowballed from there. So, you're welcome to come. You can email me at the email I put at the top, or, call my number or text me, and then I'll send you the link to register for tonight's class. And it's ongoing Thursdays, at least for now. I don't know.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Anne-Marie, thank you for bringing Mark to us. And Carolyn, we hope to see you on some more Moxxie things. Don't be a stranger to us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Be well, everybody. Send me feedback on how this
Bye-bye.
works for you when you start implementing it. I
Be
appreciate it.
well. Thanks. Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye.